All aboard, bitches.
Welcome to Boss Builds, where we here at Dungeonmancers take ordinary monsters and we make them extraordinary. Today, I am joined by my fellow Dungeonmancers, McDaggers, Lord George, and Salem, to discuss werewolves. Now,
Hell
Dungeonmancers,
yeah.
what makes werewolves so damn cool?
Their ability to blend in with the populace and to create an intrigue in your campaign world.
I think for me, it's the fear factor. I'm all about bringing in that really dark fantasy vibe with werewolves. Sheep start going missing, then
That's what I
kids
mean.
start going missing, and then
Yeah,
I love that.
yeah, absolutely.
I think also in the world of 5e various settings, when you come against a werewolf, if you have any knowledge about them, from a lore standpoint, you know that regular tactics aren't going to work against them. They're not a conventional enemy in a lot of different ways. So like you see a werewolf and you're like, oh, we have to rethink how we're gonna do this.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, honestly, that's probably one of my favorite attributes of werewolves is the fact that, like, almost unanimously across fantasy culture, people know that, either silver or some sort of special weapon is going to have to be utilized to handle werewolves. People, it's in culture, and so it's one of those interesting things that people know about, and they don't ever really walk into a situation with werewolves fully unknowledgeable of the tactics they're going to have to utilize.
For sure. I think that one of the things, like Nick Daggers was suggesting, that makes the werewolf very interesting compared to sort of other creatures of its CR level is its complete immunity to non-magical damage from weapons that are unsilvered. That's crazy. That can turn a werewolf from just being sort of like a normal... I mean, if it was just resistant, I feel like it'd be quite a different story. I mean, I think it really poses for the argument to not overabundantly provide magical weapons and equipment to your party at an early level, because you miss out on an opportunity for when, like, the fighter goes in and lands like an insanely cool strike onto the werewolf just to have it completely shrug it off. And maybe an initial encounter with the werewolf, if you're gonna do more than one with this guy. I think that's really cool.
yeah, I think the first time that you can encounter a werewolf, where you're doing, like, if you're doing like a macabre kind of gothic setting, or even in like a less gothic setting where you just have creatures, most commonly werewolves around, when I'm introducing them to players, I like to introduce them before they're ready, because I think it's a good way to say, hey, you may not win every fight, you should probably run.
Right.
And set a precedent that way.
Yeah.
So I think
you can make them run and then send them on a new quest to get silvered weapons. They're not usually in most settings a very common commodity, and so it's a good way to get them, moving forward in a story.
I think especially in that instance, I'm most reminded of Curse of Strahd when talking about werewolves, because it is the published campaign that really uses them at all, but really uses them. Having I mean, you can run into a werewolf, and yeah, you can have like the encounter where, oh my goodness, we can't damage this guy unless we burn our spell slots or sit in a tree and cast firebolt at him over and over again. You can really kind of set up, like you were saying, sort of you have like dead sheep, like sheep gun mission, right, Lord George, and then like just various clues leading up. Oh man, We've noticed an increase in sheep gun missing, wolf activity in the area. I mean, the second you say wolf activity in the area, the players are going to start going, it's werewolves, isn't it? And you'll go, no, and then but eventually, that's part of the fun, is leading in with these clues, and especially if it's new players, that moment where they realize that they're quite outmatched by this thing can really be kind of like a cool, especially if it's like a pack of werewolves or something that's like antagonizing an area, it can really set out for like a cool sort of like series of like small adventures to prepare to fight these things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that leads well into some actual legitimate cool abilities that we could give a singular werewolf of true boss stature. So what are some good ideas for the dungeon masters out there to kind of bolster a standard werewolf from just being a guy who transforms into a half-wolf hybrid who, now is immune to attacks unless you have a silvered weapon, but other than that, seems to just have bog standard claw bite and potential weapon attacks.
Right. I think drawing on inspiration from popular media, one of the cooler video games that kind of really uses the werewolf aesthetic is the beginning half of Bloodborne. I don't know if any of you guys have played Bloodborne. It's from sort of the guys that make Dark Souls. It is without spoiling, the beginning of it is a romp through a city that has become basically infected with like a strain of lycanthropy. But these werewolves are nasty, and like the name suggests, there's sort of like a very kind of gruesome blood aesthetic to the game. I think giving werewolves, I don't know, maybe some sort of like, this probably would be more on the upper end. This would be for like a higher challenge rating werewolf, but like maybe some sort of like quasi vampiric health regeneration, blood corpse eating, I think could be kind of cool. Like if there's like dead, especially if you get into like a big battlefield or something, and then there's like a bunch of like bodies everywhere in this, or like, and this werewolf is just like tearing chunks off of bodies and regenerating hit points. I think that could be really cool.
Yeah, I really like the idea of regen too. Like seeing like bits of fur get cut off and then the skin underneath just like slowly closing back together during a fight.
Yeah,
I think werewolves deserve it. They need it.
I think another thing too, going along the same lines of diving into lore rather than just like 5e convention stat blocks, the idea that a werewolf, like an elder werewolf, probably has more control over their bodies, their curse, has more mental awareness, and so having like an elder werewolf boss that maybe has learned lycanthropy, has like an inherent magic, or is able to maybe to command certain aspects of wilderness, things like that. Maybe, I mean, you could even go along the lines of like they have an inherent connection with nature, because it is a kind of a natural curse. You are infused with a bestial spirit, more or less. So having that, or even having like a more inherent control over their transformation, that's a very common trope with lycanthropes too. So I don't know if I'm necessarily speaking to like a specific power, But a boss that has more mental control, which is important, especially in 5e, because werewolves don't have the same mental stats when they woofy out. But yeah, using that convention to really sell a big boss, I think is a powerful thing.
One thing that I think is completely, because a werewolf's still classified as a humanoid, which means that a simple spell like Hold Person will destroy your werewolf encounter. I think it is almost necessary to give your main werewolf, if you're going to use a boss werewolf, give him one legendary resistance just in case.
Make sure to have in your head, if you're planning on putting a werewolf in there, what the rules for lycanthropy in your setting are beforehand, especially for whatever strain the player is going to be interacting with. If whether it's a curse from some sort of wolf god or it's maybe more medical in terms of how it comes around, make sure you know sort of what's going on with your werewolf, just so that you can stay consistent in case someone does get bitten, right? Which, I mean, is I would almost argue one of the goals of having a werewolf is
right.
You want a player to struggle with the curse, and like you said, one of the big things in just the default lycanthropy curse in 5e is the ability to embrace the curse and shift your alignment to whatever evil, to whatever alignment, which I believe for werewolf is chaotic evil. So you become chaotic evil in alignment, or to reject the curse and then transform probably on a full moon or whatever. So having that kind of choice for the player to make is very interesting, because it's basically like, well, you can either become a DM PC until you're cured, or you can try and fight this, but every once in a while I'm going to go ballistic. Is interesting, right? And make sure you know, can this be removed with the remove curse spell, blah, 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 blah. Is this too high of a power? But what I was going to go with, to go back to what you were saying, Boulder, is I would actually, for this alpha werewolf thing that we've come to discuss, which I think is kind of the direction that this boss builds episode is probably going to go in. I would say make it maybe more of like some sort of, I'm not even sure how to describe it, primordial entity than an actual just big werewolf. I'd make it some sort of like weird creature from the Shadowfell Feywilds that resembles a werewolf in form, but it's twisted and it's like the progenitor of the curse. You know what I mean? That could be really cool. Give it the ability to cast the Moonlight spell.
Yeah.
Stuff like that, like maybe once per day.
My brain like ran onto like a dire werewolf instead of just like a standard werewolf. Like he's got like bony protrusions ripping out of his back.
For sure.
Like he's got like
that's sick too. Yeah,
like maybe his like fur is like, hard as needles. Like he has like a, he can like grapple, and like you'll stick to the needles on his fur when he grapples you.
Okay, that's cool. All right, that's neat.
I think going off a little bit of what Medadger said earlier about more of a connection with their like natural side, I think adding just more wolves and dire wolves in werewolf encounters is a really cool way to use them. And I really wish werewolves had pack tactics that like worked with wolves. It'd be so sweet,
I think I would actually argue that they should have that. Yeah. I agree with that. At least like I would say that might make them maybe closer to CR4, because if you're giving them advantage on attacks, I mean, that's a pretty big deal for a third level party, especially when you're dealing, I mean, on a with a multi attack, right? You're dealing approximately 7 hit points of damage, and then possibly inflicting a life altering curse upon them. Giving them advantage on that bite, I mean, you would have to probably increase the CR, but that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about beefing up your werewolves, because we're CR3, most campaigns kind of get to that area and keep going pretty quickly, kind of a blink and you'll miss it situation. Not to say at that point having a bunch of werewolves as like the adds to a super werewolf is kind of what we're going for. Right. Which I think is a very cool motif, and I think, I agree. But it is super weird that they don't get pack tactics to me. It doesn't make any description that werewolves are particularly solitary in nature. fact, it seems that they do sort of congregate,
Well, it references
as noted
that
by
they
Lord
do.
George's background. So, yeah.
In the monster manual, it says that
I
they
just wanted-
congregate. So
Does it?
yeah,
Yeah. Well, they're packs.
Right,
you know?
no, I mean, I
That's their
agree.
Natural inclination. I want to touch back on the physical transformation thing that we were talking about.
Mhm.
I also, for listeners and other individuals who are participating in this conversation, if you look at like the ideology from World of Warcraft when druids transform, especially in like recent memory, I know. Depending on what kind of humanoid you are, some of those physical traits actually translate when you transform. And I think that could be a cool spin, especially on a boss, because you can have something like, I don't know, a Goliath that has lycanthropy. So
Oh,
instead of
yeah.
yeah. So when you have like smaller, quote unquote, smaller werewolves who were transformed humans, well, your Goliath is going to be bigger. It's just going to have that physical strength. Or if you have something like, this is going to sound super weird, but this is another kind of like physical characteristic. If you have like a Minotaur or something that gets like, it's, first of all, I never want to run across one of those.
That rocks.
that
But
would
half
be
man
metal.
and half bull, half wolf.
Yeah. Oh man. But having that and translating the physical, the strength, and also the horns, like if you see a werewolf with big freaking horns,
Yeah.
that's scary.
Yeah.
Oh, that rocks. Yeah.
So keeping the natural racial things, even abilities like Misty Step or something like that, if you're like an Eladrin werewolf, having those like racial abilities translate to your lycanthropy, super cool. And I don't think it's something that, because people just think, hey, they just transform into a bipedal wolf and that's it. But they don't have to be, especially like a big boss guy.
Yeah,
Or girl, or
I really like that, because those abilities too, like they aren't learned, they're innate abilities, so they would definitely translate.
Yeah.
I like that a lot.
I like the idea of a variant human getting bitten, and then it's got feet.
Sentinel.
It's got Sentinel. Oh god.
Yeah, it's got
a Mage Slayer.
It's got Polearm Master, and it's utilizing a glaive instead of a spear.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. In fact, I would say maybe even ramp it up a little. I would say like you could make stat blocks. You can make your own, like using the werewolf as like a default. You could make like cool, like, I mean, to me the default lycanthropes, I feel like are generally skewed towards being a human curse.
Yeah.
It's the artwork. They are generally kind of supposed to be human.
It even
Get-
has the
get
parentheses
weird with
human
it.
shape changer. Like
Yeah.
change it.
Yeah.
Be whatever race you want.
Right. I mean, this is of
Goblin
course,
werewolf.
unless in your setting it is like an only human strain, of course. But like, I would argue against doing that. Just because by and large you are not going to be infecting any person in the party at that point. Not that I think you should be necessarily completely gunning for someone to get infected with it, but the player should know that that's a danger. And you
I'm
should
going for
enforce
the
that.
halfling, because the halfling's going to turn into like a werewolf corgi that's really mean.
Oh man.
That's good. No, I like the halfling. I like the halfling turning into like a big, stringy Remus Lupin, Harry Potter, like gross werewolf. That would be disgusting.
That's
Like
how,
it's like the halfling's arms like stretch out.
I mean,
That
that's
is one
how
of my
I picture,
favorite
like,
werewolf
an
designs.
elven
I love that
werewolf.
werewolf.
That's how I. That's
That werewolf
kinda how
was
I'd picture
creepy.
that. Yeah, that one's terrifying.
When I was a kid and I
Very
watched
creepy.
that messed me up. I was like, oh my god, because he was one of my favorite characters. I mean, he is one of my favorite characters in the whole series.
Mhm.
But like that design in that movie, it's beautiful when you see it. And his whole, okay, not to go on a Remus Lupin tangent, his whole struggle of when he's transforming, like when Sirius Black comes and tries to comfort him, tries to stop it from happening. His whole process of like almost using it as like a legitimate medical problem to him,
Mhm.
where he's got like steps he takes to like make sure it doesn't happen and like all this stuff is really cool. And yeah, the scene where he like looks at the moon and Sirius Black runs up to him. It's like, okay, don't look at it, don't think about it. You're here with me. You're a guy. You're a human. You're my friend. And then he transforms into that horrifying like monster. Is really cool, and you can definitely do that, especially if you infect an NPC that the players love. I'd say that is one of the biggest things you can do with an evil lycanthropy strains, if they're at a higher level, is them having to deal with someone that they care about who's been overcome.
Make them kill the person they love.
Do they kill them? Do they have to go and get some sort of strange cure for it? Do they have to make a deal with a hag? You know what I mean? The hag that maybe initially infected them in the first place, and now that's part of their whole scheme was to do this, and then they would know that they had to go to this hag. I don't know. There's a lot you can do, but anyways, yeah, it all comes back to know what's going on with your werewolf. I'd say do not just have a werewolf show up on a random encounter table without any preparation. That's not fun unless you're at like because they're such a sinister, very, very culturally specific creature. You know what I mean? They really have like a connotation to them that people get excited when a werewolf is around. Like a vampire or a lich or even goblins.
It's one of the creatures that you can disappoint your players, and then ultimately you will be disappointed too if you don't do any prep.
So something that really struck a chord with me, inspired me when I was reading over the stat block for werewolves. They had this little blurb in there talking about the Company of the Black Moon, which was a group of adventurers who were turned werewolves. However, I think that it would be radical if there was some sort of fabled black moon in your world, that when it came, it gave this, maybe it gave just one werewolf, it gave like the, like the werewolf or like the, whoever the leader is, all these extra abilities. So like he is super powered, but only for that night, and he's planning to strike hardest on that night. And you could build up a whole adventure of the Black Moon.
Yeah.
Really good.
I think
the moon cycle. That's cool. I like that idea.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think definitely having like a super powered knight that the players maybe have to try and rush to stop this like ritual from transpiring or whatever. I don't know what you've described. I like the idea of werewolves planning. I mean, I like it when werewolves succumb to the curse and can transform regularly. I would say probably for the unwitting one, make that more of like the pity story. Make that more of the story of like, hey, I don't want to be a werewolf, and the players, I mean, they're probably just gonna kill them anyway. Let's be real. But maybe you've got like a group of sane people who are like, okay, let's try to help this guy. You know what I mean? But on the other hand, I like the idea of like, I don't know, some sort of like werewolf. In my brain, all I'm thinking of is like a werewolf, like Viking Jarl chieftain sort of situation, and his group of like werewolf berserkers that like land on the ground and they like transform to their half wolf forms and like run into a town and fucking annihilate it, and then run back to their boat and transform back into humans and row away. That's scary.
I mean, and that could be even how they recruit people to their cause, because they're infecting people, and like it's either you succumb to the curse or you fight it off, and you really don't have a choice.
Yeah,
they're slave raiders. They come in and they capture their ideal candidates, and then that's how they expand their numbers.
I mean, alternatively, in a similar vein, but a little less openly, sort of like, not just like an assault on a town. They look like, I hate the street. They look like humans, right? Have them stealthily infiltrate somewhere, and then have them transform and just absolutely annihilate a town hall meeting or something. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
To have them do like almost like a terrorist attack, like have them. That would be, especially if the PCs. I mean, even if they aren't present, to have the PCs like arrive in a town that's just been, ravaged. Practically, ravaged, like just annihilated by like a pack of supercharged werewolves that were able to stealthily infiltrate and like just devour everything from the inside out before the guard could even really react. Not that they could do anything because they probably don't have silver weapons. That's crazy. And that would set such a tone for a huge arc of your campaign. You know what I mean?
Talk about an initiating event.
Yeah.
That would be a great hook.
Yeah.
For combating against this alpha, just like you said.
Yeah. Especially if they left some sort of like mark, some sort of like calling card, like a like some sort of like going back to the Viking thing, but some sort of like werewolf equivalent of like the blood eagle.
Oh yeah.
Or like the where they like do the rib cage thing and stuff like that. Like that would be nuts. You know what I'm saying?
I don't know why, but Lord George's background just gave me like an idea with the red eye or the orange eyes. You know, perhaps like they have some sort of gaze, that a petrifying gaze or something that he has like one or two uses where he can paralyze somebody with his gaze, or cause fear.
Oh, yeah.
That's super cool.
Wisdom saves.
Yeah, give them that wisdom saves, baby.
Use whole person or whatever, but it just, I mean, the visual is different and probably more powerful to do.
Right.
Or even the idea of like hypnosis too. I mean, usually vampires and stuff get like that, or maybe it's like a maddening gaze, where so if you like go to the Order of the Lycan with the Blood Hunter, they have a thing where like if they get hurt in combat, when they're transformed, you have to like immediately do a wisdom saving throw, and then you have to attack the person that's next to you if you fail it. Well, if a maddening gaze, it's kind of like Crown of Madness in that way.
It's a pseudo Crown of Madness.
Yeah, but maybe just for like one turn, or however long you're subject to that effect. But
and I would dare say make it a bonus action, so he can still use his attack actions.
Yeah. Man, that's super cool. I like that. I'm gonna steal that actually.
Speaking of wolves, another. I mean, we've talked about now at this point, sort of the classic Van Helsing with the automatic crossbow werewolves.
What
is that what we were talking about?
That's what we were talking. That's what I was thinking of this entire time. So that's kind of. It's sort of always playing in my head.
Hugh Jackman.
Yeah. That movie rocks. I don't care what any of you have to say. That movie rocks.
Yes, absolutely.
If you're going for a setting that is more, I'm thinking Eberron in terms of you're really changing up the stat blocks, which I encourage. If that's something you feel comfortable doing, you can fucking use these stat blocks for anything. It doesn't matter. You really don't have to obey alignment. I barely use alignment. I only use it because some spells. I kind of keep like a general track of things in my head, or I can make like a snap decision. But if you're going for more of like the Eberron lycanthropes, which for those of you who don't know, there's a forest in Eberron, the setting for D&D, where a bunch of lycanthropes basically escaped, like a religious near genocide of them, where like a church was like, lycanthropy is evil, and even though we can cast remove curse, it's a lot easier to stab you. And they went and they tried to stab all of them. So these lycanthropes are just sort of, they're refugees out there. And if you want your lycanthropes, even in their transformed states, to not be evil, like if you want them to be like forest guardian sort of situations, I think that could be fun. I'm thinking Princess Mononoke was what I was thinking wolves, and my brain went to Princess Mononoke, with her living out with the wolf pack and them attacking the human civilization and like trying to stop them from making guns and stuff like that. I mean, you can have like a regular. I'm just
Princess Mononoke
neuron activation.
The alpha dire werewolf.
Yeah, but so what I'm saying is like the lycanthropes in this instance, the werewolf pack could be attacking this human civilization. They're like, well, they're mining silver to make silver weapons to kill us, and the human civilization's like, well, we're making silver weapons because they want to eat us. You could have like a really cool, like, players have to choose their own side in the conflict sort of situation, and or maybe try and bridge the gap between the two, or you could have like a third thing happen and the two of them have to team up together, and you've got dudes with silver bullets and guns riding on the back of wolves. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's a lot, There's a lot you can do there.
I think this brings up a good point too. That is pervasive through everything that we try to do as Dungeonmancers, but also specifically for this discussion. This is not like a rule. No one's going to judge you if you don't think this way, but usually it should be narrative over alignment or narrative over convention. And that's really kind of the driving force of all these discussions that we have about boss builds, is that if you just play to the stat block, your players are going to recognize that, especially the more familiar they become with the stat blocks and the conventions of D&D or tabletop as a whole. If it's narratively driven, then you're actually telling a story, and it feels less like just like I'm not trying to berate anyone, but it feels less like D&D, and it feels more like storytelling. So, and I invite my other Dungeonmancers to speak to this, but especially about werewolves. You don't have to be evil. They could be cool, or they can be good, or they can be justice driven. I find characters that have like a moral compass, even if it's not necessarily aligned with like most people's moral compasses, but if they're driven by these intrinsic motivators, it makes them so much more impactful for your players. So just, you were talking about forest guardians, things like that. Well, they may be killing villagers or whatever, and that's not great. Like, murder's not a good thing to do. But what's the other side of the story? What are the villagers doing, or what put everyone in that situation? And so adding dimension, you don't have to justify murder, or anything like that. That's not really the point. The point is to create a well-rounded story. So I think narrative over alignment, narrative over convention is important, especially when you are trying to elevate an idea like a character that's so well known. Yeah. Werewolves, So, sorry, that was a rant,
that's cool.
I invite my Dungeonmancers to go in.
I agree.
So yeah, we've talked quite a bit about some story implements and potential entire campaigns or story lines you could run with a werewolf. So what are some actual tangible abilities? What are some no shit, here's an ability you can give this alpha werewolf?
Yeah, Lord George, kick it off. Go, go, go.
Okay, so we've gone over, thrown out pack tactics, few racial traits that can carry over. I think when you're scaling enemies with your party, a way that I've just decided I really like to do it is with the party's proficiency bonus, just like they do in Tasha's with like the new ranger companions and stuff. Werewolves have a 12 armor class. That is not going to hold up past level 4. Even 3, it's going to be very rough.
Yeah.
Past level 1.
So I'm thinking, yeah, and if we have a dire werewolf who's like bone carapace, like you were talking about earlier, give them that AC boost. I think werewolves just in general need a flat stat block upgrade, higher strength, higher dex, higher wisdom too.
Uh-huh.
Wolves can hunt, like they need to be perceptive. The proficiency bonus isn't enough. So I think just like everything flat needs to be increased for werewolves.
Yeah, if you're trying to scale up the engagement, as it were. So.
Right. No, I agree with that. Yeah, absolutely.
What do you think, Salem? What's a cool ability that you could give a special wolfie?
Well, I brought up before, maybe a 1 a day, and this is just because, oh wow, Salem, very creative. Werewolf moon. Giving them a moonbeam is fun, especially if they're like one of these like avatars of lycanthropy or whatever we were talking about before.
Mm-hmm.
But like Yeah, I think. I mean, playing off of the transformation aspect. If this is a boss battle, and I'm talking like a real boss battle, make the boss battle multi-stage. Make the boss. Maybe you start off fighting them in like some sort of like either their full human form or their full wolf form, and then they transform into their werewolf form. And even beyond that, maybe then they transform into some like horrible monstrosity werewolf form, especially if it's that werewolf that we're talking about that like eats bodies or whatever. Have it like turn into like some sort of horrible thing where like maybe it's eating, like, because in this boss, I don't imagine this is probably more on like 7th or 8th level is what we're talking about now, so forgive me if I'm a little advanced here, but like imagining like, because this werewolf, we've talked about it having ads, like in terms of either more wolves or a couple extra werewolf friends, or whatever. It'd be really cool to see this thing like eating corpses, and then like, but as it does, maybe it grows like more and more mutated, and after it takes like it feasts on like a certain amount of like necrotic flesh, it like transforms into like some other new third thing, you know what I mean? It's like maybe that way, as the players are pushing the fight and giving it opportunities to heal up, it then like over heals into like some sort of like hulking, disgusting mess where like, yeah, it's like got like it's bulbous in some parts, almost from like too much regeneration here or whatever. That would be cool.
I'm imagining like a Bane sort of situation.
Yeah.
From Batman, just like the fur starts to like subside, and you just see these like fleshy like veins and stuff pumping out of the werewolf.
It's like those chimpanzees that don't have their hair over their muscles anymore.
If this thing's big enough, and if you're in like a lair or a chamber or a clearing or something that would allow it, I think giving it the ability to like jump places would be cool. I'm still thinking, my brain is still in Bloodborne, and there's a boss, the first boss actually, which is this big hulking wolf-like thing with antlers and stuff, and it can jump like that. It's like it's got like an 18-foot vertical leap, you know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying it has to be that, but the ability for it to like navigate around, because I hate boss battles where they get stuck in the middle of the party and they just get their shit rocked. You know what I mean? So maybe this thing is you can make its size huge, right? So it's a 3x3 gigantic gross thing. It could have these 2 big arms, and it could do like a sweep attack with them that like knocks people over, pushes them out of the way, so it can like then capitalize on them being prone or something. I don't know, something like that. Especially my worry is that if we get to a high enough level here, the party's just flying and shooting lasers out of their eyes, and they have an armor class of 25. You know what I mean? So like, give this thing at least the ability to jump up in the air and like swipe at the wizard that's like flying around the battlefield. I think that'd be cool.
3D battle maps.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
A werewolf that can dunk.
What about you,
Going
daggers?
hard in the paint.
What has spurred your inspiration?
Many things, my friends, my lovers. So going off of that discussion we had earlier with the gaze, so I think if you integrated the gaze into the quote unquote normal stat blocks, so if you were traveling in a pack, the alpha, I think a really cool legendary action would be like a deathly howl that has the same effect as mind sliver. Yeah, so they have to do a saving throw, and then they take psychic damage, and it reduces their next saving throw by d4. And if you put that in tandem with the gaze that the other wolves have, it becomes a very deadly combination. And obviously the threat diminishes as like the enemies get killed throughout the fight, but like early on, that's a scary combination in my mind. So
I'm just picturing like this guy just like taking his leap, jumping into the middle of the heroes, letting out this death-piercing howl that like you know those like when you watch like a cartoon and you can see the ripples of sound waves like that happening and them just like clutching their heads, ears bleeding.
I mean, I think howls. I think that's such a cool idea. Another one. I mean, if we could take like a howl,
Yeah, I want to go on that tangent with you.
Yeah.
This is a rabbit hole.
Because
we all
I was
wanna
just
go
thinking
down.
about. I was thinking about one that's maybe a bit more lore implicative, but one like a maddening howl, where a village is like slowly just succumbing to madness as they hear this howl every night, like this like banshees wailing type of disgusting scream howl out in the out in the tree line or something. That is such a cool idea. Or I had an idea for like a pestilent sort of like plague werewolf, where maybe it's like all mangy and like fur is like sloughing off, and it's like, and maybe you could have some sort of like stink breath howl or something, like almost like you could think like a tiny range dragon breath or something. Yeah. Like it just breathes out like a plume of like poisoning smog or something.
Well,
like
and
that.
Especially if they're like infused with the Shadowfell energy, like having that like that shadow breath emanating from them would not be a stretch.
Yeah.
I think just going with like a straight summoning howl too would be great to get some reinforcements in there, even if they're just like normal wolves. If there's enough of them, it helps, you know?
Yeah.
What about you?
I think those are all great. Howls are great for legendary action. I totally agree. Those are great.
Oh,
yeah. Well, and even if you only have like one with a big bad, there's nothing more iconic than like just a creepy howl that does things. And especially if you suggested early on, just like you said, Salem, that's a good way to kind of give a little bit of a hint to what you might be facing in this final boss fight. Especially like that's super effective in a one shot, because you want to like, just like we said, drop hints, things like that. And not only drop hints narratively, but drop hints mechanically. That's going to tie in your narrative, because the players that are observant enough are going to say, oh, this is something that was discussed early on. We bookended this adventure, and that's a very concise and complete story that you're telling. So I like that a lot.
Oh yeah.
I agree.
Cool. What about you, Boulder? What's their ability you would love to see in a big woofy boss?
Well, I think it's not a surprise, but I hate being locked down in combat, just like Salem. And I've mentioned a couple different things with like the direwolf, bony protrusions, maybe even having bristle-like hair. If he's size category huge or large, maybe he's able to grapple and impale somebody onto one of those protrusions of his bones, and he's now no longer locked down in that combat and can move freely. Or he has those bristles that takes a what is it, the dwarven battle rager that is able to grapple and deal like a little bit of piercing damage on his grapples, and then you're kind of stuck to his chest as the bristles are just of his fur just impaling into you like little needles, and he's running around with you on his chest.
Oh yeah.
That's like I'm sorry, I'm just imagining this visual, and that's like, as a player, if I got put in that situation, my first thought would be like, what the hell, this is the weirdest grapple ever. But also, like, how do you deal with that, especially if you're on like the underside of this alpha werewolf, and you're like just my brain is playing this, and you're like, your body's being smacked against the ground as it's running around the battlefield, and then you're getting like thrown up in the air because now you have this giant werewolf that has an 18-foot vertical leap, and so you're being tossed around like a rag doll. It's not just like a regular grapple. And because all of the limbs are free, they have, they don't have to maintain the grapple. You have the sole responsibility as the person who is grappled to get off.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think that's a really cool mechanic to have.
I've got one that you could steal from another creature in 5th edition, which I really like this whole idea of impaling people on the chest. All of a sudden, this is my new favorite thing for this wolf to do. There's a thing in Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes called the Devourer, which is a CR13 fiend of unmistakable horror that I love very much. It is a nasty, big, pointy-eared, weird-looking thing, but its most prominent feature is that it's an exposed rib cage here on its chest.
Yeah.
Oh,
And if a creature hits 0 hit points, it can teleport that creature into its rib cage, and then I believe it gives them. Does it give them disadvantage on death saving throws while they're in the prison? And if they die, it regains hit points.
Man. That is
And
nasty.
their soul is gone. Their soul is devoured by it, so they can't even be
You're
brought back.
screwed.
I'm not saying you have to go to that level, but I love the idea of like some sort of like horrible prison cage inside of its chest.
Well, I mean,
That's
if
just
you're
Especially like the
if you're fighting
god
like
wolf.
if you're fighting like a big boss werewolf, and you know that you've been leading up to this, like, death should be a very serious
Oh yeah.
thing that happens if it occurs in this fight. It should not just be a normal death.
Right.
Mhm.
And yeah, and of course we are at this point talking about
You're a little bit higher.
all of our
level.
ideas so far have
Yeah.
been for more higher level, but that's because I feel like you would need to make this more higher level in order to really effectively, because a werewolf by itself could kind of be an early game boss.
If you have silvered weapons,
Maybe 2 or 3 werewolves and then some wolf adds, you know what I mean? That could be its own boss pretty much for a little bit.
Mhm.
But yeah, I don't know. Especially if you even pack tactics and stuff. I mean, that's nasty.
Yeah.
That's bad.
Werewolves have range, and I think that's why we chose werewolves for this discussion, because they have this strain of fear that they invoke in people that's kind of pervasive no matter what level you are.
Yeah.
But they have range within that aesthetic that they give off. And I don't know, they're a great enemy to have because they're so, just in culture, they're so well known for so many reasons. And within the world of D&D, they're famous, but also they, at this point, within like the conventional D&D, they're a little bit one-dimensional.
Yes.
So yeah, I think, I don't know. Yeah. Sorry, just to think this whole discussion, I think, was inspired by that idea.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I mean, sort of our whole goal with these boss builds videos is the idea that, I mean, the monster manual is there for your base level, sort of unchanged kind of, oh man, we're getting into an encounter, I'm going to throw out an enemy and here it is, sort of stat block.
Mm-hmm.
Change them. If you're going to make a boss battle, unless you're doing like, I don't know, a lich or a dragon, you can probably just use the default ones of those.
and we'll
but
get around to those
For
eventually.
the most part, well, yes, of course. I hope so. But you know what I mean. Like and I mean even in those cases, right? But for these lower CR things, if you shouldn't just throw them away once you're at a higher level. There's so much you can use, and especially with lycanthropes and the curse and everything, it's so interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, and for just another thing you could give lycanthropes, I mean, the bigger the bad guy, the higher the DC on the curse should probably be.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I said it. If you're getting bitten by Alpha Chief Super Werewolf Omega Godslayer Werewolf 7, it's probably going to be at least like a DC 15, 16, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean,
I would
bump it
say-
up because it's what, DC 11 at
12.
DC 12 at default. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
I'd say
think
for a boss, especially if you're exceeding like level 5,
Yeah.
make it 16. You know,
Exactly.
at that point, your players are like, they're juiced on their own magic weapons and all the different stuff they have. So yeah, make it tougher. And depending on how you write it, the curse can be removed. So it's not like you're removing their arm or something, but it's still going to be a challenge. And if you're writing a boss, make it worthwhile. You know.
So you have remove curse, in which case it will not be a challenge whatsoever.
Yeah.
I would actually argue to not don't make it capable of being removed with remove curse. Make it something ancient and more powerful than that.
And
Imagination.
I think that
Yes,
there's even a whole bucket that we didn't even tap into. Like, what happens if a high level paladin is a werewolf? Like, you can have player
yeah.
characters or like player character classes who are also like lycanthropes. This is a thing, and that's something that we didn't really dive into,
Smite
and that's
claws.
a whole different bucket, and probably a whole another 45-minute tangent to go into.
Right.
But you can give them straight up class abilities.
The totem barbarian werewolf.
Oh man.
Oh, gross.
All right.
But yeah, no, I agree. I absolutely agree.
Now,
bold to lay it on us.
I think that we've given some nice, solid abilities, some interesting combat tactics.
Oh yeah.
How, do any of you have any stories of werewolves in your games that you would like to share?
Well, Lord George, you have the most appropriate background, so you are, of course, first.
Okay.
Good Lord.
Stories, not so much. I'm currently formulating a large lycanthrope civilization for my current home campaign. I can't go into too much of the detail because there are players here. But yeah, I think I am stepping aside from the alignment for a lot of them and bringing in more of a narrative style to why they're all together. And there's a reason that the werebears are hanging out with the werewolves, So yeah, I'm working on that right now. I'm really excited about it.
Excellent.
Good to know.
Cool.
Hell
I
yeah.
love that. A narrative over alignment.
Oh yeah.
Always important. Never not important.
How about you, Salem? Any glorious stories?
Honestly, the only real time. Well, okay. I used for a werewolf. I've only really used them the one time, which I believe you're asking a bit erroneously because it was, I believe, you and Mick Daggers were both there for it. I've mentioned a couple of the mechanics I used in that boss fight here today. If you might remember, the creature you ended up fighting was a large. In lore, I believe, forgive me, it's been a while. This was in our Curse of Strahd campaign, by the way. There's a cave full of werewolves, if you're not familiar. I don't remember too much of the lore on them myself, but they're subservient to Strahd in the land. He has control over everything. But I added a special because I knew that at the level that the players were going in, you guys were just going to raffle stomp a bunch of low CR werewolves, which is, hey, surprisingly, specifically why I did exactly what we're preaching to do here today, and I made my own thing. And I created a large, kind of gangly, strange, almost emaciated looking creature, which in lore I had written down as sort of like, since the dread domain of Strahd is in the Shadowfell, just as sort of like a pure essence of lycanthropy itself, just sort of like a real spirit of the hunt, sort of pretty ambiguous. You weren't really going to be able to do any history checks and figure out what this thing was, and I wanted to keep it that way for the creepy factor of oh god, what cosmic horror did we just witness deep in the bowels of this cave? But it was able to. It had 18-foot vertical leap. And yeah, I believe it also had like some sort of like fear howl. I might be correct in assuming that. And I could be remiss in saying that it had a life drain ability, but I can't remember at this time, and I don't have the stat block near me because that was, oh my god, that was almost 2 years ago.
It's
Many
been a while.
moons ago.
That was almost 2 years ago.
It's been many campaigns and quite a few years.
No automatic crossbow though on him.
No automatic. I would say, yeah. I mean, you should leave the Artificer to that, really. That being said, Van Helsing Artificer, new character concept. But
A party made exclusively of PCs from B movies.
Man,
Very
we
good.
could go
That would
to
be a good discussion.
Yeah, we'll do a whole video on that. Okay. Anyways, but that's sort of my one was I just went for more of the creepy, sort of strange, because that whole campaign, my version of Curse of Strahd, I did play into the cosmic horror a lot more than I thought I was going to initially, while still trying to keep some of that gothic horror motif. Because I love the book Dracula. But yeah, you can keep them classic if you want. I would, for low level, I would argue probably keep them classic, or if you're an inexperienced DM, probably. But if you want to go crazy, I mean, just go crazy. It only sucks if you're not having fun.
Mm-hmm.
How about you,
how
my
about you?
wonderful McDaggers?
Oh, me? No, I could never. Sorry, that was weird. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this campaign that Salem is talking about was very, very impactful for me and for a lot of us as players because yes, I'm talking about you. I think the picture that the campaign painted and Salem painted for us as our DM at that time was very vivid, very colorful, and there were some great moments. So I'll talk about my moment that I don't know if he remembers, but this was our introduction to the werewolves in this campaign. In the Curse of Strahd, at least in the setting that we played, there was an individual in a mage tower, and we had a mission that brought us to that mage tower. And so we thought that we had got away scot-free. We were relatively low level at this point, and we thought we finished the mission. We did this kind of escort quest, and then you kind of you hear a ruckus outside of the window, and then we're like, I wonder what's going on out there. So we walk over to the window, and we see a pack of humanoids. They look like standard humanoids, and they're kind of poking around this this cart, and to make the situation more manageable for us, there was an explosion, things happened, but there were some werewolves who had, before our very eyes, had transformed. So to paint the picture, we were on this kind of island in the middle of a lake, and there was a mage tower behind us, and there was a singular bridge that connected us to the land. And so there was only, for us at that point, we couldn't fly or do anything crazy, so there was one way out. And between us and escape was a small pack of werewolves, and they had transformed before our eyes as they crossed the bridge. And so you could see their skin sloughing off and the fur growing and their kind of mandibles coming out, and you could see this gruesome, fearsome sight coming directly at us as players. And it was just at that level. I was less experienced as a player and as a DM at that point. So, but I still knew, it resonated in my brain, oh man, this is fucking scary. So, for me, the most impactful moment was not necessarily a combat mechanic or something like that, but how the picture was painted, how werewolves were put in front of me for the very first time in that campaign. So that's why, I don't know, in my brain, werewolves, they're scary mechanically, especially low level, but no matter how you use them, they invoke a real kind of visceral image to players.
Yeah.
So that was super cool for me.
Absolutely. Oh, well, I'm glad that was good.
I
Honestly,
your
first interaction with anything werewolf, and your first clue that there were werewolves in Curse of Strahd was at one point one of you, or a couple of you, might have walked off into the woods, and this was a bit before this, and you had found, tucked into some of the trees, a set of clothes hidden in the hollow in the tree. That was a werewolf's clothes.
We found that out later.
You stole his pants, and
someone's going skinny dipping.
But yeah, no. So that's one of those things, right? Because that's kind of it's strange. It doesn't outright say, werewolf clothes in the tree. It's they find a set of clothes stashed in a hollow in a tree, and it's that's
these pants smell like wet dog.
That's what, yeah, right. I mean, I would probably say you could do something like that, or if the players did a perception check of the area, you could see maybe wolf footprints nearby or something like that. That'd be super cool. But yeah, now that's a scene right out of the actual book. If you're into werewolves and vampires, by the way, I strongly suggest you check out Curse of Strahd.
Curse of Strahd.
Very good.
And I would say
Very
check
good.
out the. It is. Oh, I mean, it is. It's possibly still their best campaign that they've written, just in terms of consistency from beginning to end, thematics, pacing of it's pretty good. It's not for beginners, generally speaking. For some pretty glaringly difficult decisions early on, which could realistically TPK the party almost.
Just skip Death House. Just skip it.
Well, I don't. Okay, well, I mean, skip Death House.
Skip Death House. Do Death House.
I mean, do Death House, but skip Death House. But I'm talking about the windmill.
Oh yeah.
The windmill will fuck you up.
No, do go in.
Don't go into.
No spoilers. It's a lot of fun in there.
It's
a lot of fun. Anyways, I don't want to spoil it. Check that
silver
out.
weapons.
Especially check out the new version of it. Props to Wizards of the Coast for going back and fixing some things that they recognize as mistakes. I really respect that.
Boulder, we haven't talked to you yet about your werewolf experience.
My werewolves. Well, I'm
cycling through all my accents.
So my only true werewolf experience is in that campaign. As a DM, my players have evaded my werewolves every single time. Every time I try to hint at it, they run the other way and are cowards. But notable, that campaign was my first long-term campaign that I played in. And that werewolf encounter was actually the first time that it dawned on me that character death is a real and tangible thing that happens.
Mm-hmm.
And funnily enough, that character ended up dying not too many sessions after that one.
Yeah.
Because I actually contracted lycanthropy in that fight, and we had to fix that.
You did.
Mm-hmm.
You did. That's right. Wow.
We were not high enough level to remove curse, so yeah, we had to go fix you.
Yeah.
Let it be known, he did not die due to the lycanthropy. It was something else that was amazing.
It was.
We may talk about
very.
the story.
It was sick.
Very good.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you
our favorite characters recording, I'm just gonna put it on the agenda for later.
Yeah.
All
right, go ahead.
If you guys have any stories,
that'll make me cry.
Of any werewolf encounters or cool werewolf design that you've come up with, or ideas that you've come up with while watching this video, let us know about them. Like we want to know about stuff that you guys are making or stories that you guys have. Like we'd love to read and hear about it.
What's up, Salem? Speak your piece.
Can we talk about Lairs?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about Lairs.
Before we wrap it up, let's talk about Lairs for a couple minutes.
Yeah, I mean,
talk about...
if you want to stick around and listen to us rant about werewolf Lairs.
Sorry, we were teasing you. We're about to.
Yeah. That's what the end of this video will sound like. Spoiler alert, but
quick and dirty. Let's do Lairs.
Okay, I had a cool one while we were talking about. I was bringing up that Princess Mononoke thing, but I didn't want to go into too much of a tangent about it. I like the idea of werewolves besieging a silver mine. For the purposes of, I do not want you to have silver because that hurts me bad. But I like the idea of a bunch of werewolves that live inside of a silver mine that they drove the miners out of so that no more people can mine silver.
That's pretty cool.
I think that would be visually very interesting. And the players would go, why are they living in the silver mine if they're weak to silver? And it's like, well, we can't get the silver because they live in the silver mine. It's like, oh, okay, I guess that makes sense. These werewolves are way smarter than I thought they would be. And then that would set up
mental strategy you could implement with that would be super cool.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Anyways, that's the whole reason I brought up Lairs. I wanted to share that in this video.
Silver mine.
I mean, I like the idea that werewolves are like harnessing the power, like, they're utilizing some sort of lens that they have, and it's like funneling the power of the moon into like an item, or it's funneling the power of the moon into like a dais that's powering the whole lair.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Religious Werewolves. Another great band name for the list.
Saloon Werewolves, yeah.
What about you, Lord George? Do you have like a cool lair?
Man, I think going with I think having a lot of reserves of food and stuff that maybe they can heal off of, like you were talking about earlier, should be cool in the lair. I don't know, man. The silver mine and the moon wolves are pretty sweet. How about you, Dagger?
Something that we haven't really touched on is like a more modern setting. One of my one of my favorite kind of like B movie franchises is Underworld.
Yeah.
I love Underworld. And so having like a more modern urban setting would be really cool. And I like the aesthetic of like, you know, this is very like early 2000s, the long leather dusters and like black clothes and stuff. But having a roving gang of werewolves, or even like something even antithetical to that, having like the lawmen and women and individuals, like cops or detectives, and they are a family or a shadow of werewolves. And so you have to fight the law of the land, and they're werewolves. So I think that could be cool. And that's not like a lair, but that's like a setting thing that I think would be really, really fun.
Yeah, I mean, basically just if you make your whole campaign Blade,
Yeah.
I'd really appreciate to see any work. If you have a Blade campaign going on, put it in the comment below so I can steal from it.
That'd be rad.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. Well, I just wanted to bring up Lairs because I think that's an important part of boss.
It is, yeah, and especially with werewolves too, because they're gonna have a den. That's very
like, there's gonna be things of special value to them that is here. They're not gonna want people coming strolling into their house. Like I figure werewolves are very highly protective of where they're located. They probably that information
or any cubs they might have.
Yeah.
Or whatever a baby wolf is. Wolf cub?
A cub, yeah.
Pup.
Yeah.
Werewolf pups.
George coming in
with
the proper terminology.
Well, what do you think, listeners? What are baby werewolves called?
They're darts. Right?
Woofies? I vote woofies.
Woofies.
Werewolfies.
Have maybe at one point have the players go and visit like their grandma, and when they walk into a room.
Oh yeah.
She could.
But spinning on its head, you and your grandma are the lycanthropes.
The werewolves.
And the little red is actually a werewolf hunter.
Oh, that's really
that's
a
awesome.
dark turn.
Or, well, so like the wolf would be little red, and she's a werewolf hunter, and you and your grandma are the wolves. You'll figure it out.
You'll figure it out.
If you want to do that,
you'll
you'll
figure
do
out,
it.
not us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just.
Write that one shot.
We're just spitballing
Yeah,
here.
we are.
Write that
We're
one
just
shot
going
and
off.
send it to us.
Speaking of our wonderful beloved listeners doing things and send it to us, let's put that pitch out there. Boulder.
Yeah, we have
Ask them to send us things.
Yeah, we have a great one-shot worksheet that we would love people to utilize. We have the link in everything that you can find us, on Instagram, here on YouTube, and we post the link to that thing everywhere. And if you make anything with it, please send it to us. Email it to us, DM it to us. Like, we want to hear what you guys come up with. Very bad. And if it happens to work out, maybe we'll even feature some of the material that we get from you guys on the channel.
Yeah, we always reply to our Instagram DMs, just at the Dungeonmancers LMC on Instagram. So if you send over there, we'll for sure get back to you.
Absolutely.
And that's also down here in the
I will
description.
talk to you about D&D until you fucking
So your
subscribe
ears
and then
bleed.
unsubscribe from us again. Yeah, just to get me to leave you alone.
And the best thing is, if we talk too much, you can just leave us on red until.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm used to that.
Yeah,
So
I think that we will wrap it up, and I hope all
Cool.
of you have a beautiful day.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.